Now time to bring you the second part of our interview segment for today. We're focusing on the cryptocurrency market. Now, the spate of meltdowns in the cryptocurrency space have erased tens of billions of dollars of investors' assets and sparked urgent calls for regulation of the freewheeling industry. Now, the price of Bitcoin breached about $19,000 earlier, and Ethereum fell below $1,000 by Saturday morning, and by this morning, it was attempting to play back around $20,000, $21,000, also going back on the back of what played out yesterday, extending the brutal crypto bear market to new lows. Bitcoin plunged nearly 10% in less than 24 hours, adding to a series of sustained losses over the last several months, as it now sits below $20,000 for the first time since November 2020, down more than 70% from an all-time high of $68,000 per coin in November just last year, losing about $900 billion in value since that peak. The massive crypto meltdown is part of a larger market downturn brought on by elevated inflation, rising interest rates, the war in Ukraine, COVID-19 lockdowns, and even supply chain chaos. Now, to give us more insight into this development, as well as trading activities at the cryptocurrency market, I have joining me virtually, I have technology expert Mujib Ishola. Thank you very much for joining us on the show today, Mr. Ishola.
Good afternoon.
Now, we've seen quite an interesting twist of fate in the pricing and the value of Bitcoin, falling about below $20,000 for the first time since late 2020. We also see a similar slide as well with Ether. What do you make of this sign of turmoil in the cryptocurrency industry amid wider turbulence in the financial market? Just yesterday, we also saw Bitcoin attempting to rise up to $21,000, but closed the day at about $20,500. What's your thought on what's playing out really exactly at this point in time?
Okay, so there, it is very interesting, and I think it's the nature of the market, right? Volatility is one of the reasons why people even get into this in the first place, right? What is happening now is that people are beginning to understand that cryptocurrencies and blockchains and any technology cannot actually exist in a vacuum. Real life scenarios and real life forces are beginning to play up within how volatile the market is going to be. Nobody could predict the war, the recession that is, kind of looming, and all this. This is a reality of what is happening. If you remember, like COVID times, right, which is still here, right? There was a lot of money to kind of like make such risky investment by people, but that is now going away because we're now going back to what we term as normal. Now, people are beginning to run away from riskier assets because you really need to now come back to the real life in terms of the price of gas, the price of food, commodity, and the rest of it. And that is what is playing out. So there's the demand is becoming lower for people that are not Bitcoin or cryptocurrency maxes. The demand is reducing. Therefore, the prices will drop. But what is happening right now in terms of volatility is not new. It is normal in the market, and it will continue till the market finds its fit. And it's not just about Bitcoin. Other projects out there are also losing value, right? Also, other projects are losing value. It's not about just Bitcoin alone. It just happens that, well, Bitcoin is the one everyone else is tracking.
Okay, now the spate of meltdowns has also definitely really raised billions of dollars of investors' assets and also sparked urgent calls for regulation of this freewheeling industry. We also see USDT, a stable coin on Terra ecosystem, implode just last month, and this was one of the elements that heightened the calls for regulation. To what extent now do you think this call for regulation will shape up how we'll see the cryptocurrency market play out, the intricacies that will come to bear?
We've talked about this a lot in the past in terms of why regulation is needed, and it must come, because if you think about what the government should be doing and what we as citizens should be doing, cryptocurrencies and blockchain in itself, in the way it's currently used, kind of like pitches those two apart, right? The government is meant to be looking out for the citizenry when it comes to things that, would hurt them and stuff like that. But we find that cryptocurrency, it's a different paradigm in terms of being decentralized and the rest of it. Whilst it in itself is not a bad thing, regulation is actually needed to curb how, to guide how people do things. We've talked about regulation in terms of exchanges, which is going to be the starting point of all this. As it stands today, it is already implicitly regulated, because you can't actually get into cryptocurrencies without actually exchanging fiat of some sort, right? And that is a starting point. Today, you have to go through the banking process to get that to happen. The next step will be to look at the exchanges, right, and regulate them. Now, it's going to be more difficult to try and regulate P2P side of things, or people actually, using decentralized exchanges and the rest of them. We'll tackle that when we get there. But right now, I believe that regulation is actually needed. It goes against the grain of some of the, goodness of blockchain and cryptocurrency itself. But we are now in a place where we need to, safeguard everybody that is playing within. And if you cast your mind back to CBDCs and how governments try to get into this and solve some of those problems, right? That it's not going to go away. In itself, it's if you think about it, a stable currency, a stable coin that is backed by, a sovereign entity. Now, that is a middle way between solving the problem of cryptocurrencies that are decentralized and actually being regulated to somewhat that everybody feels safe, playing within the space.
Mujib, I'd also like to have your thoughts now. That element of P2P is still what instills some level of caution from the part of the CBN. Hence, we've also seen the restriction on the part of the Nigerian government here on cryptocurrency transaction. But irrespective of this move, we are seeing Nigerians trade about 7 to 7.75 billion naira worth of crypto transactions here in the country despite this ban. Why do you think the government is so critical of this P2P element?
A lot. When it comes to P2P, you can't see into the transactions. You don't really know what's going on. You don't know what is being paid for. You don't know what is being bought. You could argue the same for cash, but at the end of the day, you could still trace cash somewhat from the source to, how you could trace it, but with the P2P, it's a lot more difficult, right? Now, people will do what people would do. Right? We just hope that people will do the right thing every time and all the time, right? So P2P makes it difficult to see into the transaction, and there's a lot of gray activities that could happen. Now, we're not saying that is not happening with cash or
that's not the entirety of the picture, really.
No, exactly. It's not the entirety of the picture, and P2P will continue regardless of what anybody does to it. These days we're calling it to P2P because of the technology angle to it, but it's not different from two guys sitting at a pub and exchanging whatever they need to exchange. So we shouldn't equate that to painting everything with the same brush, because at the end of the day, not every activity is criminal. And if there's a criminal activity, we should prosecute it correctly.
As such, yes. Okay, now let's go back to how we're seeing the Bitcoin play out here and other stablecoins. What would it take really now for Bitcoin to become much more attractive once again to investors? The current downside is definitely weighing in on investors' sentiment. Looking at from the previous one that we had, which is plummeting with tech stocks, as larger economies are also showing a bigger level of fragility. Inflation is rising, and we have a full-fledged recession looming along the horizon. Now, how or what do you think it would take for Bitcoin to become much more attractive once again, beyond all of the volatility playing in the market?
Okay, that's kind of like the $1 million question. Nobody actually knows. There's been prediction of Bitcoin going back to 100,000, or some even predicting 250. That's going to be a difficult type of prediction because you do not know what the real life situation is going to be. Today it's Russia, and tomorrow it could be anything else, right? It's going to be difficult to predict how this is going to end up. But with anything in any market, the prices will go up, the prices will come down. Eventually, the value of Bitcoin is going to find its own level, and which is why if you could, Bitcoin and any cryptocurrency for that matter is a very risky investment, right? You should know what you're doing before you get into it. It's a speculative asset and should be treated as such. If you're looking for price predictions, I'm not sure anybody can give that to you. You just have to do your own research and know what you're doing. If Bitcoin goes to zero tomorrow, the question you need to ask yourself is, are you going to be okay? If you're not going to be okay, then you should think twice about the investments you're making right now. And, so no predictions.
Okay, now let's just still have one element here where you make a forecast. Now, for the rest of this week till the end of this month, do you see a further free fall in the transaction value of Bitcoin, or you anticipate some recovery like we saw yesterday where Bitcoin transaction volume was attempting to lift up towards the $21,000 benchmark? Let's also look at Dogecoin, USDT, Terra. How do you see things play now? What's the fate of these currencies, these coins?
Okay, without not a financial advisor, but if you think about USDT, that's already taking some serious bashing because of what is going on. So people would think twice about looking at that project because it's broken, right? All altcoins will trail off Bitcoin. So whatever Bitcoin is doing is what they will do. Will the price go up? Definitely it'll go up. By how much? Nobody knows. Is it going to come back down? Yes, it's going to come back down, because you have to understand that the moment it goes up, there'll be some people that will be looking to get out of the game. If you look at what is happening with a lot of the big investors and institutionalized investors, right? They're also looking to wait for the right price so that they could give their investors back, some sort of profit, right? So it will keep going that way until, the right levels are found. And the right levels can only be found when we find the right project and solve real world problems with these technologies.
Thank you so much for your time on the show today. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, Mujib, and definitely we'll keep our tabs on how the market is going to respond to all of these intricacies, and then we'll have a bigger conversation once we have the bounce back in terms of Bitcoin's trading value. Thank you once again.
Thank you.